Good evening, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to the August 9th, 2022 meeting of the Milton Conservation Commission. Commission members are appointed by the Select Board to implement the rules and regulations of the state's Wetlands Protection Act and the Milton Town Bylaw governing wetlands as well. As a matter of formality, we introduce ourselves, which we'll do in a moment, but the second issue of formality is that we invite everyone to speak, ask questions, make comments, but we do require that you identify yourself. It's part of the open meeting law regulations, and the meeting itself is being recorded. So to begin with introductions, my name is John Kiernan.
Steve Ibis here, conservation agent.
Arthur Doyle, member.
Hans is next.
Hans Van Lingen, Conservation Commission member.
And Ingrid.
Ingrid Davey, Commissioner.
And Wendy.
Good evening, I'm Wendy Garpo, I'm a commissioner.
And Todd.
Todd Hamilton, member.
And Tom.
Is he in out of the waiting room yet?
Tom, you've got to unmute.
He's on mute.
Hello, Tom.
Am I there?
There you are. All right. All right. Thanks, Tom. All right, we're all on board. And tonight we're going to take a look at the agenda, and we have a number of items that have been requested for continuance until the September meeting. And we have agreed to those continuances. They were made in writing. And let me see. I think number 4 is the request for determination of applicability at 1259 Brush Hill Road. That is for Lot C. And number 5 on the agenda is an amendment to the order of conditions. Same address, 1259 Brush Hill Road. That is Lot D. The applicant, Joe Federico, through his agent, has requested a continuance. And Steve, what is the date for the September meeting?
It's the 13th of September.
All right. And we have agreed to continue 4 and 5 to the 13th of September. Number 6 is a notice of intent at 648 to 652 Canton Avenue. And number 7 is a notice of intent at 582 Blue Hill Avenue. The applicant is the same in both of those items on the agenda, and they have requested in writing a request for continuance, and we have granted that request so that the new date for 5 and 6, I'm sorry, for 6 and 7 will be September 13th. And now we go to number 8 on the agenda, which is the revised landscape plan at 593 Blue Hill Avenue. And we also have a request for continuance on that as well. And we have granted that continuance until September 13th. So if anybody, a member of the public, is waiting for anything from 4 through 9, not including 9, those items will not be addressed tonight.
And John, 9, we did get a request. That was a request last month to hold it over till September. And that it's not reflected on the agenda tonight, okay? So that's going to be also the 13th of September. That's number 9, 175 Governor Stoughton Lane / Milton Woods.
That's perfect. I didn't know that because I've recused myself from that project from the beginning. So
Sure.
it's good to hear that number 9 will be continued to September as well, which leaves us only with 1, 2, and 3. And then number 10, which is additional business. So let's go directly to number 1. This is an informational item from the EPA, and it relates to the Neponset River dredging project. It is actually not part of the Superfund project, but it's separate and distinct. And we have, Tracy, I know you're going to address it, but is there anybody else with you that's going to address it tonight as well?
Oh, it's just me, Gary Hedman, who's been leading up the sampling efforts. He was caught on a spill, an emergency spill response this evening, so he's not able to attend with me.
All right. Well, we will defer to you, and you will be the presenter. So tell us what's going on with this dredging project.
All right. So I guess to remind folks, the town, along with the city of Quincy and city of Boston, received a grant from the Environmental Development Council for there's our report for a feasibility study for dredging on the lower Neponset. So we have started activities there. One of the first activities that we had on our docket was to identify what we would be looking for with respect to, I think this is our proposal. Do you want me to bring up the recent report that we submitted?
Tracy, I have it on the screen now. I think I'm going to give you the plan, right? Is that what you're looking for?
Yeah, I think you have our proposal,
Right.
the latest.
Which has the plan in it, right?
It does, but we also had a couple of more, I guess, graphics that we submitted
Yes.
along with our report.
Yes, I'm trying to find that right now. Okay.
Yep.
Oops, stopped sharing. Okay, for some reason. Sharing. Let's see. That's not it. Here we go. All right. Do you remember what page it was on out of 175?
Fortunately, it's all the lab stuff is in the very back, so it's 1, 2, 3,
Right.
Appendix 1, I think, isn't it?
6.
Yeah, hang on. We're just moving through it very fast.
Yeah, so I guess, while you're moving through the appendices here, so what we started with was
There we go.
there we are, and there's the plan.
Is that
So
the one
that's
that you'd like
yeah.
to take a look at?
That is the one I would like to take a look at. So
Right.
there's 4 key areas that we were looking at as part of this project. One was Milton Landing. The other is the channel between Adams Street and the Neponset Avenue Bridge. And then there were 2 other channel areas off the federal channel. So kind of to plan north, actually, I guess really to north and east, the Squantum channel that goes over to Squantum Park, and then the UMass Ferry channel.
Right.
And that goes over to UMass Boston. So those are the 4 areas that were identified as part of the grant and is part of the project that we're looking at. So a couple of, I guess, things to make notes. The Lower Neponset here is within the area of critical environmental concern. So there's going to be some restrictions that have been placed on dredging through the resource management plan that was developed back in the 90s when the ACEC was developed. And so they have a restriction for, dredging, essentially maintenance dredging where you've dredged before. So our focus area was a channel between the Neponset Avenue Bridge and Adams Street that's 50 feet wide, and it would be 6 feet deep. So the goal there is to reestablish that channel to those limits because that comes from Chapter 353 of the Acts of 1923, where that this channel was permitted, and that was included in the resource management plan. We also looked at, both maintenance dredging and some improvement dredging over at Milton Landing, based on the Child's Engineering report that was done a few years back. In large part because that's an area where it's a good connection to the river for Milton and for residents. And this was another area that as we move forward, we'll be having the discussions with the regulators on, any restrictions, or is this an area that they can see approving for improvement dredging. So based on those areas, we developed a sampling plan, coordinated with the Corps and Mass DEP, and took 11 cores, of which we sent 10 samples to the labs. And the results that whoops, was there a question?
No.
I don't believe so, Tracy.
Okay, I'll just keep going. If there are questions, just feel free to jump in. So we sent the labs or the samples to the labs to be tested for the criteria for, landfilling and Mass DEP 401 water quality certification criteria. So we tested them for metals, cyclic aromatic hydrocarbons, PCBs, both congeners and air chlors, extractable petroleum hydrocarbons, volatile organic carbons, total organic carbon, and then percent water, grain size distribution, which we use to, kind of help determine what, we could potentially reuse the materials for. And then what we call toxicity characteristic leaching procedures, TCLIP. So that's usually for metals to see if there's a leaching potential. And that plays into like whether or not we can landfill some of this material. And if you want to go over to the insets that are over to the left hand of the plan, you'll see, I'll say like quick snapshots of summaries of the analytical data that we received. So there were some hits of chromium, lead, and PCBs in the samples that are going to play into where we can potentially dispose of this material. There's a cell out in the ocean that's, has a very high quality of sediment, can be deposited there. This would not be available for ocean disposal. Because of the PCBs, there's going to be some restrictions, at least for some of the areas for where we can dispose of the materials. So believe in Massachusetts, you can have PCBs up to 2 milligrams per kilogram to be disposed at a landfill. Otherwise, they need to go out of state for disposal. So there a question?
Yes, Tracy, Arthur. Could you go back, please, for a moment with the disposal that you were talking about? I think you said the bay.
There's a they call it a CAD cell. So there's like a cell that they allow for some dredged materials to go, and there's in order to send any material there's an extreme amount of sampling that has to happen. What we've done is like preliminary sampling. If we thought this material could potentially go there, we would have to bioassay. We would have to do bioassay tests to make sure like it wouldn't harm, aquatic critters. So there's a pretty high bar to meet there, and this would not. And I think we knew that going into it.
Now, would anything ever be brought out and dumped into the canyons?
There's very specific locations that are permitted for that.
And so Tracy, I'm sorry, go ahead, Arthur. Sorry.
I just had one more. And are any pits created that are later capped, underwater, undersea pits, excavations that are then filled and then capped?
There are, again, there's a pretty extreme permitting process to develop those.
Yes. Okay, thank you.
New Bedford is an area where, because of some of the materials that they were, dredging out of there, they created one of these cells there. Okay. So, there's a few of these around, but this would not be appropriate here. So then, we're looking at what can we do for upland disposal, and there will be some restrictions on us landfilling some of this material because of the PCBs.
And I think I heard you say shelf. Where would that shelf be located?
The shelf?
Did I hear you say shelf?
I don't think so.
Okay, good, thanks. Okay, I'm fine.
Yep.
So Tracy, just a quick about what's the sort of volume we're looking at for disposal?
So we're looking at about 10,000 cubic yards for the channel, about 40,000 cubic yards for the Milton Landing and the channel in and around Milton Landing. We don't have a volume yet for the Squantum or the UMass channels. We're waiting on bathymetric survey for those.
And
So,
you-
you know, shall we say like 50 to 75,000 cubic yards.
and none of the areas sampled would qualify for CAD disposal, or is it just an assumption based on what you've seen so far? And
I think we're ruling out CAD disposal here.
Okay.
You know, because what we're seeing is typical of, you know, having some upland, you know, upland industrial uses that have impacted the sediment throughout.
Tracy, did you say CAD disposal?
CAD, CAD,
Right, and that is, and what is that short for?
Covered area.
confined area.
Thank you.
Tracy, I had a couple of questions for you. The first one is the grant that was received, of which the town is a beneficiary, the public at large is a beneficiary, was for what? Was it the feasibility study, number one? Number two, the actual dredging? And the real question I've got is, if off-site disposal is required at a licensed site disposal facility, where is the cost of that going to be borne?
That's a good question. So the grant is for the feasibility study. So what we're working on now is to get a sense of, you know, what do we think are some of the factors that are going to play into where we can dispose of this material, which plays into the expense for disposal. So at the end of this, so we've just developed, or, you know, gone through this sampling. You know, here's our results at this time. Now our next steps are to look into what can we do with this material and where can it go. Part of that is going to be talking with EPA to see if they are going to, you know, kind of roll this, you know, in with the rest of the cleanup that's going on, the new Superfund site that's immediately upstream of this area. And I guess the question is whether or not this will be considered, if we need to remediate it under the Toxic Substance Control Act. So TSCA is how we use that acronym. So, you know, and I'll say Gary can speak to this a little bit better than I, as he's been through this up on the Housatonic, where EPA has some discretion here. And in that specific instance, they require, again, we were working immediately downstream of a designated Superfund area, and they pulled in and required that cleanup to follow the TSCA regulations. So that's part of the next steps, is to start doing outreach to the regulators to have that discussion on where we can send this. You know, is it possible that this gets combined with the work that's happening upstream? And, you know, what are the cost implications of disposal here?
All right, thank you. My second question is, about 10 years ago, CZM came to the Conservation Commission and did a presentation and indicated that right at the Adams Street Bridge, which is a little bit upstream of where the Milton Landing dredging is going to be, it's just a few hundred feet, is the largest smelt hatchery in New England. I don't know if it still holds the title as the largest in New England, but I was in my canoe on just this past Sunday evening, right there, and there were fish everywhere. I couldn't tell you if they were smelt or not, but because I think the spawning is probably earlier in the spring, but there were thousands of bait fish there, or something about that size. So my question is, particularly in light of the tide that comes in and out, it's a big tide. And I'm just wondering whether or not when the dredging takes place, is there any scientific mechanism for ensuring that the PCBs that are going to be released as the dredging process takes place? I know the sediment is going to be removed, the spoils are going to be removed, but during the process of dredging, is there any protective mechanical device that can protect that smelt hatchery? And or can we limit the time when it is done so that it's not at the spawning season?
There's definitely time of year restrictions that we can follow to limit impact to species. I'm not sure about dredging, but maybe we can do it here. For other in-water work, we often use what's called a turbidity curtain. So it's a curtain that's anchored at the bottom and kind of floats at the top, and it collects sediment. So it almost like how we use erosion control measures, hay bale silt fence on upland sites. So that's a best management practice that we can use for some in-water work.
All right, that is an area of concern. It's very sensitive area, and we wouldn't want to do anything to disturb the hatchery.
And definitely time of year restrictions are something that we often work with, so that that's a way to limit our impact on fisheries and other species.
So Tracy, this is Ingrid Beatty. When were you intending to do the dredging?
So there's no plan yet for dredging. So we're still in the midst of the feasibility analysis.
Okay.
So what we've done thus far is taken the bathymetrics information that we have. Cashman Marine Contractors did a bathymetry survey for us. We've taken that, identified the channel, so this is where we're coming up with, what cubic yard we have thus far for the potential dredging volumes. And now we have the analytical data that will play into how we can dispose of this material. So the next steps that we need to take are to start, reaching out to the regulators to talk with them about their opinions. Because as I said, in some areas, there's some gray area with respect to how EPA will look at the PCBs here. And that will play into how and where we can dispose. And all of that will play into the ultimate cost. So at the end of the day, for the project that's in front of us now, for the feasibility study, we're looking to identify the amount of material to be dredged. What are some of the contaminants of concern that are going to impact our disposal options? Outreach to the regulators, confirm the regulatory pathway and what they might be looking for with respect to some of the mitigation measures or some of the areas of concern that, including, the herring, the smelt hatchery. So some of those things will be taken into, we'll start to document that now for future consideration. And then, come forward with, thoughts on where this material can go, what the costs are for, permitting, design, and then, anticipated cost for the ultimate dredging and disposal based on the information that we've gathered through the feasibility analysis.
I understand. Thanks.
Tracy, so the bathymetry that was collected for the Milton Landing area, would that be of any value to, say, the Milton GIS department? I mean, that information, I don't know to what extent you surveyed or if it was just transects over long periods, but is that something that'd be worthwhile for them?
If they're interested in that data, we can provide that to them.
And then secondly, and I'm looking at the data, so the sampling that was done out there, was it just composites, or
Yes.
you don't have depth samples so you don't know if, say, PCBs are just a surface impact or if they are lower in the water
That's correct.
what was the average depth or to what was it, superficial, or did it What were your grabs?
No, they went down a little bit. Bear
Was-
with me a second while I,
About 6 feet.
Yeah,
6
that's
feet.
what I read. I read the 6 foot
Yeah.
level.
Okay,
I thought there was a depth in one of
It's
those figures.
It's in Appendix A, I think. It might be.
Yeah.
it is, we have information on the depths that we went through.
okay,
They were nearly all entirely organic silt with sand and shell, but there was one that had clay, a layer of clay, which was hard to explain.
sure.
Yeah, in general, it looks like we went down to about 5 feet. I think the goal was, 6 feet or, but yeah, I think our deepest was 5.5.
Could I make a couple of comments?
Yes.
When you say that a channel was authorized in 1923, 6 feet deep and 50 feet wide, do you know if that channel was ever dredged to those specifications?
My understanding is that it has been dredged in the past. It has been a while, but forget if it was from the resource management plan or somewhere else, but there were indications that that channel has been dredged prior.
Yes, I'm very familiar with that because a lot of the dredge was placed on the marshes above Granite Avenue. And they made these cells and berms and they pumped the dredge and the dredge covered the marshes and so forth. And I think that was done at a variety of times, including when they built the expressway, because they had to excavate for the pilings. I was surprised to see that a mean low water, nearly the entire channel from Milton Landing to Neponset Bridge, has about 10 feet of water. It's more than 6 feet. And so the lion's share of the material you were talking about removing is not from that mile or so of channel, but for the basin around Milton Landing. That's where most of it is proposed to come out.
That is
And
correct.
I would be curious to say, have you spoken to people who use a river who have told you what their experience is about scraping bottom and about what sort of basin they would like? Is that where your plan comes from?
So anecdotally, we had been told that the channel was, filling in and, but the bathymetry indicated that, to your point, that it hasn't filled in as much as, we had heard anecdotally. And I don't know if that's in part because it's compared to the width of the overall river, it's a fairly narrow channel. You can see it on some of the ortho photos. It's pretty clearly defined even.
Yes.
that you can pick
Anytime
that
you
out.
go to low tide, it's just a little ribbon down the middle of the mud banks.
Yeah.
It looks narrow. But so I was surprised to learn that that narrow little ribbon is 10 feet deep at average low water, but that's the case apparently. Another question, when you remove all this material around Milton Landing, how quickly does that hole fill up again with new sediment coming from up the river?
That is a good question. It's been decades since this channel has been dredged. So it may take a little while for that to fill in, but it's kind of hard to say. It depends on a lot of factors that are coming, whether it's warm water that's coming in or erosion from the banks. So it's a bit dependent, and we have not looked into it.
And Tom, I would venture to guess that it's also going to be very dependent on how well EPA controls its dredging upriver.
Yeah, you might say that it would make more sense to work downstream in
Yes.
general.
Yes, agreed.
Thank you.
Any other questions from commissioners? Are the members of the public that would like to ask a question or make a comment? And to keep in mind that this is informational only, this is not a permit request, but it's very, very helpful information for us, certainly. Anyone in the public wish to ask a question or make a comment?
Looks like there's somebody that has their hand up. It says Timothy's iPhone.
All right, Timothy's iPhone. Please speak.
Hi, Mr. Chair. This is Tim Zerwinski, the Director of Planning and Community Development. I'm on my phone. I didn't know that it shows up as Timothy's iPhone and not my full name. So sorry about that.
Okay.
Yeah, I just wanted to provide a little, and I definitely appreciate the commission getting straight down to business, which is great. With Tracy, and I think your team has done a great job. I wanted to provide just a little bit of the sort of the context of kind of why we're doing this and what this project is about. And one thing I wanted to make very clear is that this actually isn't associated with the Superfund designation and any kind of work that's being done around the Superfund site. Although, as Tracy alluded to earlier, there may be a kind of a folding in of this project into some of those considerations. But the Superfund site sort of ends or begins, depending on which direction you're looking, at the Baker Dam, and kind of deals with kind of the freshwater portion of the river. So that being said, this is not primarily an environmental cleanup project. And sort of that gets after another thing that Tracy spoke about is that this is a maintenance dredging feasibility project. So we're not actually looking to remove all of the contaminated sediment that may possibly be in the riverbed in this portion, which we may not even be allowed to do that even if we wanted to, with the ACEC regulations. This actually started. And came out of the planning efforts that we've been doing around Milton Landing and Milton Village, kind of identifying Milton Landing as really, what should be a premier waterfront recreational area for the town and quite frankly for the region. It's the only place where folks in Milton and Southern Dorchester, Mattapan, Hyde Park, anywhere can actually get to the ocean. It's the first place you have an opportunity to do that. And we think that, we can do a lot of really great things down at the landing. So when the Seaport Economic Council grant came up, we sort of jumped at it. And we partnered up with City of Quincy, who we've been working with, who has their own interests in kind of dredging this channel. And although we weren't co-applicants with the City of Boston, we did coordinate with the city. And I think if there is, a determination that, dredging would be in everyone's best interest, we would work to, get them on as a partner. And I think that speaks to a little bit of, there's the question of, what is the cost and where is that money going to come from? The Seaport Economic Council, which is the grantor of the grant that we're working with right now, also has actual sort of implementation grants that are available. And I think that we would be in a good position to, eventually receive one of those grants if and when we decide to do dredging, based on this feasibility study. Whether or not that covers the entire cost is up for, continued analysis. But what I will say is that, this is something of a kind of economic development, transportation, recreation focused project. We're never going to be, we talked about New Bedford earlier. That's not the kind of, waterfront that we have. But we do have a recreational waterfront. And I think one thing that you're seeing, especially in City of Quincy, is, up at Squantum Point at Marina Bay, is the ferry that they've been running between Squantum Point, the downtown waterfront, and then out to Winthrop. That pilot program has been re-upped. City of Quincy has their eye on that as a really viable form of transportation to downtown. And so they have a great interest in, a maintained and navigable channel kind of from Squantum Point out to the federal channel out in Dorchester Bay. City of Boston has less of that on their kind of Neponset River waterfront, But there's developments all over at Port Norfolk, on Morrissey Boulevard, not far from Commercial Point. And we think that they would also have a great interest, again, in sort of transportation and kind of recreational opportunities that, a deepened and maintained, channel would really support those things. And so, it's going to be a question, once we get the feasibility kind of analysis done and kind of have a better handle on costs and a better handle on, if this thing is even possible, there would be kind of a continued discussion and negotiation between, our two partner cities, and seeing, what other additional resources may be needed beyond, grant funding, to do that. So we'll definitely be, having those conversations. The other thing, and I tend to agree with everyone, who says, it makes sense to start, is it downstream or upstream? But on the Superfund side of the bridge, for the very reason of, if there's going to be disturbance of materials and everything like that. What I'll say about that is, there is a potentially definite timeline on this project in a way that there is no timeline on the Superfund project. We're in extremely early days of that. We've been meeting with EPA, and they've been great partners. We actually have a meeting with them next week, but they're nowhere near ready to say, this is when we're going to start working on this cleanup. And so, the designation is a huge milestone and is extraordinarily important. But also, it's kind of an open question as to when, any of that cleanup will actually take place. And so, that's one factor that I think will have to go into the town's considerations of, do we want to pursue this element of a dredge project, or do we want to kind of wait and see, what the timeline for the Superfund project is? I mean, fortunately, this feasibility study is going to take a little bit more time, and we'll have more kind of opportunity to get some clarity on Superfund. But that's going to be one of the considerations that goes into this. So I'm going to stop now. If anyone has any other kind of those contextual type questions, happy to answer them. But we definitely appreciate the opportunity to come here and let you all know about what we're doing down here. And as it relates to the Superfund project, I'm absolutely certain that that our partners at EPA would be happy to come and provide a similar presentation if they haven't already. We're in the process of planning some informational workshops with them out in the neighborhoods that I think we'll definitely want the Conservation Commission to be involved with. So we'll be sure to keep you posted on that.
Tim, thank you very much. That's very helpful to us, and thank you for your time and energy. Any questions from commissioners? Or comments or questions from members of the public?
Arthur?
Yes, sir.
I'm very supportive of this from a number of perspectives. There are safety issues that are involved with boating in the channels, particularly when they become filled and they therefore become hazardous. There are flooding issues that are detrimental to the marshlands in the area. And there are flooding issues that can have great adverse impact. And the timing on this could be very, very critical, regardless of the simultaneous work that's being done on the Superfund, particularly with the rising elevation of the sea level. We see this at the Neponset River, Granite Avenue intersection. So just
3 millimeters a year.
I'm sorry, Tom?
3 millimeters a year is a rate of sea level rise.
Yeah, that's not insignificant, is it?
No, I mean, we've all seen it come up. Older we are, the more we've seen.
Yeah. So the more this is done, I know there are areas in the state, particularly in southeastern Massachusetts, where creeks and rivers have not been dredged. In fact, the mouths of them were previously altered for easy access by water vehicles, and the results have been detrimental. That didn't happen here. Just want to indicate that we have a lot of advantages to having this work done and having it done on a timely basis.
All right, so Tracy, can you give us a guesstimate as to whether the next step will take place? I know I'm asking you to look into the crystal balls and make a guesstimate, but do you have any sense as to what the next step will be and when?
So our next steps are to start project coordination and outreach with the regulators and stakeholders. So we're looking at August, September timeframe to start the preliminary coordination with Mass DEP, Army Corps of Engineers, as well as the Neponset River Watershed Association and EPA. So that's the next first step. And then we'll start reaching out to sediment disposal facilities once we've gotten some feedback from the regulators on disposal options to determine the potential alternatives that we have for managing the sediment that's dredged. And that will provide us some input on costs for disposal as well. And then we'll start working on identifying what are the feasible dredge alternatives, including dewatering alternatives and disposal options for us. And then we're working on preparing the preliminary opinion of probable cost. So it's August now. We're working on, shooting to have a report by the end of the calendar year.
Oh, great. And would you be kind enough to send a report our way to the Conservation Commission?
Yep. We can,
Right,
we'll work through Tim on that, but I'm sure we'd be happy to share what we've developed.
Perfect. Sounds good. All right, we thank you very much. And with that, I think we conclude item number 1 on the agenda. And we can give our thanks to Tracy and to Tim, and we can move on to number 2.
Thank you all for your time this evening.
Thank you.
Thanks, everybody.
Thanks,
Thank you.
Tracy.
Thank you, Tracy.
Second on the agenda is notice of intent at 750 Randolph Avenue. That's Boston Gas. Do we have an applicant with us tonight?
Hi, Steve. This is Erica St. Pierre. I'm representing the applicant here tonight. I'm with TRC Environmental, and with us also is Aaron, who's representing the Boston Gas Company.
Oh, great. Thank you. Can you just tell us in summary format what your plans are?
Certainly. So as you said, the notice of intent application was for 750 Randolph Avenue, which is the location of the Milton take station for the natural gas distribution system with the Boston Gas Company. The work itself will be on the access road, which is immediately south of the Granite Hills Golf Course fairways. The work will entail the replacement of 3 culverts on that dirt access road leading to the natural gas take station. There are 3 existing culverts, like I said, one being an existing 36-inch corrugated steel culvert, which is in severe deterioration, along with 2 24-inch culverts that are further down the road. All 3 culverts will need to be replaced to facilitate additional work that will be going on at the take station in the future. Like I said, they're in deterioration, and those pictures were included in one of the appendices of the notice of intent. The 36-inch culvert will be replaced with an actual 4-foot box culvert. Was there a question?
I don't think so.
Okay.
Wendy,
the
I think
36
you're
inch.
Wendy, I think you're having a little difficulty with your audio. I think you're
Oh,
getting.
am I?
Yeah.
Are you on? Your phone still on? If your computer kicked in, did you leave your phone on?
I no, actually, I've logged off, but I'm going to mute myself just to.
Okay. Thanks, Wendy. Erica, please continue. Thank you.
So Steve, if you proceed to page 27, it gives a good overview of the 3 locations.
Let's see, 27. Hang on. Where am I?
29.
29. Okay, that's this one right here, right?
Yes.
Let's see. Let's bring that a little bit bigger, okay, on the screen. And let's see. Can do this, maybe. Oh. Oh, there we go. How is that? A little bit better?
One more page down. Yep.
More page down.
Yep. You're right there. Perfect. Oh.
Good. Good.
So what you're looking at there is the 36-inch culvert that will be replaced by the 4-foot box culvert. The box culvert has been chosen to not only help with the hydrologic connection between two wetland areas that bisect the road, but also to help with of conforming to some stream crossing standards. So the box culvert will be buried such that there'll be 2 feet of natural substrate there to facilitate the connection between those two wetlands and stream crossing standards. The next page down, Steve, actually shows the two 24-inch culverts that will be replaced.
Right, and these are located almost due south of the box culvert,
That's correct.
closer to the take station.
That is
Okay.
correct. Yep.
Yep. Yep. There we go.
So these have a much lower flow. That's why they're designed at a smaller diameter. They are existing 24-inch corrugated metal culverts that will be replaced with 24-inch corrugated metal culverts. The impact to wetlands, however, is a very small impact regarding these two culverts, as the engineers have designed flared ends on those to help slow the water flow down. On all 3 locations, there are some scouring of the down gradient areas, more severe, obviously, in the 36-inch case. And I believe, Mr. Ibis, you walked this site with Sonia, the previous project manager on this project.
Yes, back, I think it's about a little over a year ago.
It was actually, yes.
Right, right. But there was a good group of folks there, right? And we all agreed, we all saw what we needed to see, which is very good.
Yep. So the project timeline will be probably 1 to 2 weeks for the replacement of all 3 of these culverts. Like I said, that there's a small wetland impact regarding these 2 that are in front of you now, 251 square feet. We are not proposing replication or replacement for that area, but we are proposing restoration and including some planting of Lyonia or mulberry bush to help stabilize the banks after the culverts are replaced.
Makes sense to me.
We have not been issued out. Oh, go ahead.
What is the adverse impact for that 251 square feet, and what is the restoration going to do for it?
So the replacement of the culvert itself is actually part of the restoration because it will restore the hydrologic connection between the wetland areas. If you go up a few pages to page 27, it will actually show the 3 distinct wetland areas that are on the property.
Right there.
Yep. So the green shaded areas are the delineated wetlands that TRC delineated a year ago. The white dots are the culvert areas, those 2 being the 2 smaller, and then the larger one, the 36 inches up where Steve is pointing right to right now.
And this area is the cul-de-sac, just for your information.
Is that where the methane gas outtake, or whatever you call that, burning section?
I'm not sure anything is here, John, located here.
It's a little to the north along the base of the slope. Yeah, it is there. Maybe
Right
it's
in
off the picture.
Well,
Yeah, more to the right.
That's where the culvert is, Steve.
Culvert's here. And then the other 2 culverts are there. The large culvert.
No, I'm sorry.
Oh, the station itself.
No, and I know the station. We've been. This is where we were for the
Windmill as well.
capping. Yeah,
Yep.
well, going way back. I mean, to
Right.
cap the landfill, then the golf course,
Right.
then the take station, of course.
Right.
Are there any? And Erica, this goes back to you. Boston Gas has done other things at the take station, or it might have been, I never know which company is in charge, if it's National Grid or I get lost in that. But I know at one time there was, well, going back to the wind turbine, Natural Heritage required a snake study there. And then the last time I think the gas company was in there, they had to stay away from a couple of areas that were Natural Heritage had found some Indian artifacts or something. Steve, do you remember that? That's only about 4 or 5 years ago.
Yes,
I think.
so we're still waiting right now for something from MISA, the MISA
That's
group,
correct.
right? So we
Yep,
can't
there are.
close course tonight. But we're
Ingrid
still-
and I were up there at that time. Probably one of the coldest days I ever experienced outside of when I lived in Chicago. Ingrid will remember that lovely site walk. She's nodding in the affirmative. And all those conditions were present at that time.
Yes.
So that is
we're-
correct. There are two invertebrate species, endangered species that we filed a MISA checklist for the middle of July that has not been issued a
late
conclusion
letter.
on that yet. Correct.
Sure. So
All
we're
right.
unable to close tonight, just for your information, Erica.
Yep, I understand.
And
Could
we don't want
you,
to do anything to slow this down because it sounds like a good project, but I would be interested in looking at this. We've had culvert issues in the past. When the town was originally permitted to go forward with the wind turbine, I know there was an issue getting some of the equipment in because of the weight. And when this project first came, well, before this project of fixing the culverts, there was some, I think we had National Grid in here asking for some more significant work at the pumping station. And I think some of us brought up the issue that if the equipment is heavy, if you're bringing cranes in or very large boom trucks, be careful of those culverts because we've had problems with them in the past. And the town in particular had a problem there because of the weight of the wind turbine coming in. So the reason I'm giving this background is to see whether or not anybody would like to go up and take a look at this. And given the fact that you don't have the permits yet, we won't be slowing you down. We usually can do these site walks pretty quickly. Is there an interest in taking a look at this? I know, Steve, you've already seen it, but I just didn't know whether or not members of the commission would
Sure.
like to see it as well.
I have a question. I've been watching that transfer station for like 30 years. And it keeps growing in size and more equipment is added in increments. And I've seen the pipeline trace itself to the right of where you see it here. A few years ago, some enormous timbers were placed in the ground to support vehicles. And in the submission, it talks about the need to bring heaters to the site, which are presumably heavy. Could we hear what these heaters are exactly?
So part of the natural gas, I'm certainly not an expert, so this is kind of my high level overview of what the heaters are. But part of the natural gas pipeline is heating the natural gas for proper distribution within the system. These heaters, as you indicate, are very heavy, and that's part of the reason why these culverts must be replaced ahead of that construction.
Thanks. And if you go by the chain link fence around the installation, you see there's a chimney. And if it happens to be cold, you see the air wavering on top of the chimney, presumably because of a discharge of something, some hot exhaust. What is that? Why do I see that when I walk by?
The heaters themselves are fueled by natural gas, in which Boston Gas Company has an air permit for.
What's an air preventer?
An air permit?
I see. Yeah, okay. So for some reason are they burning gas or releasing it, or why do you see that heat coming out of the chimney?
I can't speak to that. Aaron, can you speak to that at all?
I unfortunately cannot. It's in the same boat as Erica, the bugs and bunnies of the company, and not necessarily how the heat system actually works. But I do believe it's just an off product of the heat distribution of the gas going through the distribution system and into the local system itself.
Could you explain to me why, even though they haven't never dug up the pipeline, in my recollection, that the installation itself is like doubled or tripled its size in 30 years?
Yeah, so there's two entities that are there. There's also I believe it's Enbridge. So they're the transmission system of the gas system. We take off the off product of that and distribute it down into the distribution lines and get the connections into our streets. So I don't have any insight as to what the gas transmission facility is doing there. All I know is that we have, our fenced-in facility and the inner workings of what's going on in our system.
Thank you. It is a
Yeah,
little bit yeah, it's a little bit ancillary to what we're talking about. It's just my own curiosity.
So I'm maybe in partial response, Ingrid, please chime in on this, but my recollection is they had to make provisions up there, and this may relate to the expansion that you're talking about, for equipment to be used in cleaning the pipes.
Yeah, there was a pig operation, I believe, a couple years back, and that is exactly what you're talking about, Mr. Doyle. It's basically just an instrument that goes through the pipe and identifies any sort of corrosion or any issues with the pipe itself. So I do know that happened a couple years back, but I wasn't a part of that process.
That was the time that Ingrid and I were up there, that was.
Okay.
Just one other comment.
Yeah.
I'm sorry, Ingrid, go ahead.
It was a motorized camera device of some sort.
Yep. It has a camera on it as well.
Just to add that the Massachusetts Association of Conservation Commissions had an outstanding session on culvert construction and improvement, maybe about 3 years ago. And I was very pleased to see what it is that you have in this proposal, because it's a 100% overlap with the recommendations and the design types that were presented by the MAC at that time.
Thank you. I will say culvert designs have come a long way.
Stream flow standards, you mentioned them.
Well, let me go back to the question to the Conservation Commission members. Do you want to have a site visit? We can't vote on this tonight until such time as we've heard back, or the applicant has heard back from Natural Heritage in any event. So the question pertains. Do we want a site visit or not?
I would like to understand, if better understand what the restoration piece will look like, and also relative to where just to get an idea of where the new culverts are going to go in the context of, where I'm actually on the ground, and whether or not, to what extent the wetland impact is going to be during construction, and if there is a potential need for additional restoration, or if it is as limited as indicated.
So that sounds like a yes, you'd like to see it.
I would, yes.
That's somebody has to open the gate. Remember, the gate was locked last time we went.
But we get in, though. We get in.
Yes, we did get in.
See the gray area at the bottom? Not the rectangular one, but to the one to the left of it. Yeah, that is one of the prettiest vernal pools in the entire Blue Hills. Yes, that is just gorgeous. Curiously, though, when it has been sampled, it hasn't had as many obligate vernal pool species as the one up at the upper left, right by the landfill.
Right.
That one, where it has that little red dot in it, that one is very, yeah, further, yeah, right in there, that red dot. That's the certified pool.
Right.
That is heavily used by spotted salamanders.
Is the first one, Tom, that you mentioned certified?
I don't think so, but I could do it myself probably from my own photos.
Oh, well, that's interesting.
Yeah, I
So,
don't, I
and-
don't believe it's certified either, John.
We should
Right.
walk in there when we go there and just take a look at it.
Yes.
Yep.
All right, I am not available for the next 2 weeks, but that should not inhibit the Conservation Commission from going. I would be available the week after. I think I'm back here on the 22nd. So I'd be available the next week, but if the group can make it on either of the next 2 Saturdays, then you could do that without me. What's your availability? Tom, I'm looking at you. What?
Yeah, I'm sorry. I'd have to go look at the calendar. I'm away for a week this month. Let me look it up. Yeah, I'm gone from the 14th to the 21st.
So
All
that
right,
would
so-
rule out the 20th, but not rule out the 13th, right?
Yeah,
How's everybody else looking on the 13th? Which is this coming Saturday.
This
Hans,
is
can you make that?
Erin Milton. I can make that work.
Yep, that works for me too.
Yeah, it works for me as well.
Is Todd around? I can't see you. That's why I'm asking.
Yeah, I'm here.
Can you make the 13th?
Funny as it may seem, before Bill Clark left, I had to go up to the dog thing that they were going to build, and Bill and I went to these culverts because I guess there was a problem with the culverts. So I'm familiar with it. I was up there right before he left working for the town.
Good.
So I've seen all 3 of them, plus that dog pound or dog animal shelter they want to build.
Well, that's the animal shelter is before you make the 90-degree.
No,
turn
I
to
understand,
the
but we
access
did
road.
the whole thing and we went up to the gas thing.
Okay. Yeah, I think we've all been
I've
there.
been there. I'm very familiar with it.
All right. So can you make the 13th or not?
I can't, but like I said, I've seen it. I know it. It was part of Bill's concern with the weight of the thing being crushed.
Right.
Right.
So I can make the 13th.
Okay. So that's Wendy, Ingrid, Tom, and Hans,
And Steve.
and Steve. And what about Arthur?
Uncertain, and like Todd, I've been up there. Ingrid's been up there. I remember.
Oh yeah, I think we've all been there.
Yeah. Do you need us?
No, we don't need a quorum because we don't have anything to vote on yet anyway, because we don't have a response from Natural Heritage.
Okay.
All right. So let's plan. And Erica can.
So just post it, John, and if I can be there, I will be there.
All right. Fair enough. All right. And I will not be there, Arthur, just so that you understand that.
That's fine. Thank
But
you.
we'll post it for the 13th at 8 o'clock in the, or Wendy, especially since I'm not going to be there anyway. Do you want to make it 8:30?
And somebody will be there with a key.
We'll have to arrange that. Steve, can you get that from, I know Kathy's out, but maybe
Chase.
Phil Driscoll or Chase,
Yes.
can you get you that key?
Yes.
And this time we'll get the right lock, right?
Yes, we will.
All right, Erica, is that doable for you? Or Erin, or both?
Yes,
this
Aaron.
is Erin. Yep.
Okay,
Yep.
so
Sorry,
it'll be
Erica.
8:30.
Aaron and I will coordinate that.
That's
Yeah.
perfect. All right, so
Can we do 8? Would that work for folks? I prefer earlier if possible.
Wendy, you're getting some pressure here.
Ingrid.
Oh, Wendy.
I think 7 o'clock or 6 o'clock.
And Steve has a problem with early warnings, as you know.
That's right. And Steve has a long way to drive.
Yes.
There you go.
It won't take us very long to look at all 3, Ingrid.
Okay.
Okay.
Right, 8:30 Saturday. That's great. Erica, Aaron, thank you very much. And there'll be a group at the gate, and the meeting place should be right there at the gate. And then Steve will open it up and you can drive in and park along the road.
Right, actually, you can park in what I call the cul-de-sac area, which is close by, right in here. If you're looking at the screen, this is a perfect place to park and then be able to turn around easily.
Right. That's what I was talking about, the cul-de-sac as opposed to the culvert.
Right.
But that's where the burn-off is.
Yes.
Okay. All right, good. Well, thank you very much, Erica. Thank you, Aaron. And most of the group will see you on Saturday morning, this coming Saturday.
Great.
All
Thanks,
right.
guys.
Thank
Thank
you
you.
all. Thanks.
Thanks.
Thank you very much. Yep.
All right. Next on the agenda is, what have I
Okay.
lost? Okay.
347 Hillside. It's a request for a certificate of compliance, John.
Right. I know. I've can you hear me?
I can, yes.
Okay. All right. I've just lost, for some reason, I lost the pictures. And
That's because I
there it
stopped
is. Yep.
screen sharing. Yep. I'm trying to find the next screen share picture.
No,
There we go.
I've lost Zoom entirely, but you can
Oh.
hear me, so I'll keep going.
Okay. What I'm showing there is the surveyed in location of the septic system leaching field and 2 tanks, and then a pipe from the residence on Hillside Street at 347 Hillside. And we do have a memo from the designer as well, John,
Okay.
saying it was constructed in substantial compliance with the plans.
I let me go back because I just picked up, and I don't want to be a nitpicker here, but it says constructed in compliance with the approved septic design plans. Is
Right.
that the same, one and the same as the order of conditions that we issued?
Hope
I just
so.
want to I want to make sure there's not a difference between their septic design and our order of conditions that identified the plans.
I don't believe there is, but I'm sorry, I don't have the OOC in front of me, John, here tonight.
Okay, nor do I, but
Right.
I would assume that Norfolk Engineering would be referring to the septic design plans as exactly the same as the ones that we approved in the order of conditions.
Yes, exactly. And then I'm looking at the date here. It's 2/14/22. So my guess is absolutely they use, because we allowed the work when did we?
December, or was it the fall?
It
When
was
we
the
were all
fall.
there together at a site walk.
That's right. It was the fall that we were there. Okay, so my guess is yes. Should that not be the case, we can go back and ask for an updated plan. But I believe this is the same plan that we saw.
All right, fair enough. Are there any questions on commissioners as to whether or not we should issue this as a request for certificate of compliance? And you have seen this, is that correct, Steve?
Oh, I sure have. Yeah, in fact, I was the one who is sort of instigated the request just to, finish the project off.
All right.
Steve, this is Claude. Hi, I'm at 347. Bob Vay is trying to get back into the Zoom call. Can somebody let him in? He could speak to this clearly.
Oh, great.
His computer ran out of batteries.
Sure. Let's see if I can do something for him. Well, waiting room. Yeah, there he is. I'm going to admit him. Yes.
Okay. So we can cut to the chase. And by the way, Steve, you were not sharing any images on your screen before. If you thought you were.
Oh, I didn't realize that. Okay, let me try that again then. Anybody see that?
Yeah.
Yes, right.
Yeah.
Okay, very good. Here's Hillside Street. North arrow is here. You remember our friends at 339 are over in here?
Yes.
And this is number 347. Thank you, Claude. Appreciate that.
Uh-huh.
So Bob, are you there?
I'm back.
Wonderful. Can you let us know if this plan is the same plan that you presented to the commission for the order conditions?
I mean, this is an as-built plan, and so it's, you know, are there slight variances? Yes, but it's uh, mostly the same plan.
Right, okay, there you go.
So,
Well,
Steve,
my question was an appropriate question.
yeah,
Because
So-
the certification from the professional engineer under our rules and regulations is that the as-built, I mean, they have to identify the deviations, and it has to be in substantial compliance with the plan that we approved.
and John, this isn't
Yeah,
signed,
and
it's stamped by a PE.
This went in exactly the way, I mean, it went in the way the plan was approved by you folks and by the Board of Health.
Okay, Hans, I didn't hear you. Were you taking issue with our rules and regulations?
No, I'm saying that this plan isn't stamped by a PE or an RLS. So, I mean, this is stamped by a registered sanitarian. So I brought this question up previously for the NOI application, for the same project. But, you know, so whether or not it's in substantial conformance with the plans, and whether or not, you know, this meets the standards, it's not really clear to me.
Well, the Board of Health would have had an engineer review the as-built,
That's right.
because they won't give you a certificate without their own engineer reviewing it.
And so is this what the Board of Health reviewed? Or approved?
That's a question to you, Bob, I think.
Yeah, this is a copy that was given to the Board of Health.
Did the Board of Health give you a certificate?
I don't have the certificate yet. We still have to do a pump test out there.
Okay, so they want to see it go through the D box evenly?
Yep. Yes.
Okay. So that means, Hans, the D box, they'll pull the cover off it and they'll pour water through it. If it doesn't go into all the chambers evenly, they won't sign off on it.
Yeah, and so, I mean,
It's actually the pump test for the pumps.
Yes, correct.
so this isn't, so, I mean, we're talking about a wetland notice of intent application. You know, not, while it's for a septic system approval, it's not exactly the same thing. I think we did allow some flexibility, obviously, for this application. So I guess at a minimum, I think we probably want to get the consistency with the Board of Health, and if they approve it, I guess.
I agree with you, Hans. Board of Health should be approved before we are.
I agreed, and there's no time component on this. I don't think, as far as I know. Sometimes people seek a certificate of compliance when they're trying to get, you know,
Sell
funding
it.
for a purchaser on the sale, but it doesn't sound like that's what's happening here. Claude, am I correct?
Yeah, I'm here. I'm here to stay.
Okay, that's good news. So what I suggest is, and I assuming we could get that, we could vote on it without you know, much ado at our next meeting. Do you anticipate, and again, this might be looking into the crystal ball, but either Claude or Bob, do you anticipate that the Board of Health will be able to respond before our September meeting?
Yeah, I will. I can't speak for them, but I will broach the subject and see if we can move it along.
All right, then why don't we put this on for a September meeting? And I don't think it'll be a big deal, but if we had that in hand, I think we'd be more in conformance with our rules and regulations. Is that, do you agree with that, Hans?
Since we allowed it for the NOI, yeah, I guess it should be acceptable.
Right, so, but on the basis that if the Board of Health has got a professional engineer to review it and they issue the certification, then we could rely upon that ourselves, and that would put us in conformance with our own rules and regs.
Yeah, exactly.
All right, so why don't we, with the assent of the applicant, we can put this over until September 13th on the basis that the Board of Health will issue the certification before then, and I don't anticipate any issues with us. So do we have the applicant's assent to do it?
That would be me, Claude.
That would be the
Yeah,
Claude. Did you say yes?
Yes, please. Yes, please.
All
Absolutely.
right. All right, perfect. All right, so we'll continue this until September 13th with the assent of the applicant, which is great. Thank you, Claude. Thank you, Bob.
Thanks, Claude and Bob. Yep.
All right, so that actually concludes our agenda for tonight, except for additional business. Am I correct, Steve, on that?
Yes.
All right, so additional business. Steve, do you have anything?
A few things. Hang on a second. Let me go to my list here. Yes. Did I talk about the records retention schedule yet? I just got a records retention schedule, which I can circulate if you'd like from the IT gentleman, Mr. Mallet. We've been talking about IT issues in the Conservation Commission department recently. Okay, so there is a records retention schedule, and it says that, you know, some things you can get retained until they're recorded in the registry, and some are permanent. And I'll leave it at that for the moment, okay? Just to let you know. And that's a state, it's called a Municipal Records Retention Schedule, and the agency is the Conservation Commission. It comes from the state, just to let you know, all right?
But what does it say? I mean, can you
Well,
summarize it?
Well, no, because there are 3 pages worth of items and issues. For example, a request for determination of applicability, we get to retain it for 1 year. Engineering drawings are permanent. Environmental data forms retain until the certificate of compliance has been issued. So it's a massive and complex retention schedule that you probably need another person or two just to figure out and just to do the work.
It's a labyrinth.
Exactly. It's terrible. It's really terrible. I just want to let you know.
Right, and that's good information, but you might want to keep going, or maybe Arthur can keep going, because I know there are multiple efforts to try to digitize our entire record-keeping system, because traditionally we don't do that. And I know, Steve, you've been good at scanning things in.
Right.
Kathy does it when she can, but we can't always do it because sometimes we don't have the right equipment to scan in the larger plans.
Exactly. Yeah. Okay. Number 2 for me is, did I talk about the final decision at 107, 111 Hillside Street at the last meeting? I don't think I did I?
I don't think so.
I don't remember it.
Okay, so they dismissed the appeal from the Bacardi interests, and they approved a settlement agreement with a final negative determination of applicability with conditions. Okay, I just want to let you people know that information.
Now that was discussed at length between town council and myself and all the multiple layers of lawyers involved. So that was quite a process.
Right. And the third one for me and last is, I just want to let you folks know that 101 Neponset Valley Parkway has started working on that project, okay? The trees are down next to the road, the ditch has been cleaned out, and the culverts were, as well as bedding stone, were on site on Friday when I saw it. There was also a piece of equipment that was within 25 feet of the wetland, so I had them move it. Hopefully it's been moved, and I'll go down and take a look at it in the next couple of days sometime. And that's it from me. John, I know you had, and Arthur had some other issues.
Yeah, let me go back first to the 107 and 111 Highland Street.
Sure.
One of the issues in the settlement there, and this is the Bacardi Trust, and the lawsuit was actually in the Superior Court, was the Bacardi Trust against the Milton Conservation Commission. That's different from the appeal of there were 2 appeals, actually, one from the RDA and one from the ORAD. and they both went up simultaneously to DEP. DEP made a ruling in conformance with our rulings on those two issues. And then it was appealed further to a hearing officer. That was, settled, and most of it was dismissed. And then what was remaining was the Norfolk County case. And that was settled between the parties. And the issue became whether or not, if you recall, on our site walk, we went in back of the, I call it the barn. There was an area there, and I think Tom Palmer, you were there, and somebody said that looks like a vernal pool. So the settlement was that the applicant would consider that to be a vernal pool. So my only concern from our perspective was, well, you can't declare it a vernal pool because that requires that you to conform to the criteria listed in the Wetlands Protection Act and the regulations there too. So I said, you can't just, wave a magic wand and change the criteria, but you can agree that you will consider it, you will treat it as a vernal pool. The reason that's important is that under the town bylaws, there is a 100-foot non-disturbance zone. So the applicants agreed to that. So it's not a vernal pool according to the state standards, but the applicant agreed to treat it as such for purposes of this project. That was the settlement.
So to kind of clarify, so it hasn't been certified, or the process hasn't been completed to certify, so it hasn't been determined either way.
You are correct. And it was very clear, and I alerted everybody that I said, look, you're not going to be able to certify that because it's not March or April. It's not going to work.
As part of the agreement,
an inlet and an outlet, John. So Natural Heritage will never certify, in my opinion.
I wouldn't agree with you there, Steve.
You wouldn't?
I've certified pools that have inlets and outlets. You have to prove that they go dry.
Oh, okay. They do go dry in that one. Yeah. All right. Thank you, Tom.
All right. But the point is, they were alert to the fact that if it's not done according to the criteria, it's not a certified pool. But if you want to treat it as such, which is simply translated is they're not going to do anything within 100 feet of that. They're going to declare it to be a vernal pool for purposes of their application.
Well, that's advantageous from our perspective.
Yeah, it is. I thought it was. Yeah.
Yep.
So have they provided any indication whether or not they'd have issue with certification of that area or potential submission of application for certification at some point, or is that kind of off the table?
No, the applicant has just agreed to treat it as if it would be. And by eliminating, by dismissing the Norfolk County case, they essentially have adopted the delineation that we did, or that we approved. And we didn't do it from a scientific point of view, but we all went out there, we looked at it, and we took a vote, and I think we adjusted some of the flags. So that is the delineation of the wetlands. So they've dismissed their appeal of our delineation.
Were there any conditions that the Bacardi side achieved in the settlement?
Oh, I think that's what they were looking for, to have that area of water considered to be a vernal pool.
Okay.
Wouldn't it be an advantage for everyone to have it officially certified come spring, come next season?
Mm.
And have it documented?
Yeah, sure. But I don't think it matters because the applicants already agreed to treat it as such.
Has anybody seen or heard vernal pool creatures in that?
I've
I
been
have
there
not.
in several seasons,
And
but I've never waited it looking for the
okay,
obligate breeding indicators.
right. Yeah, I'm just very. I'm not sure whether you will find them or not. That's all.
And so that's kind of the point. So say this project does not move forward, that the protection that you're talking about would only essentially apply to this applicant.
You are,
So,
That's
you are
my
correct.
concern. Right, that's.
That's
my
the deal.
concern.
and, whether or not it's a vernal pool, I think should be independent of that. And
Yeah.
so
Agreed.
I don't know if it would meet the criteria or not, but I think there would be value in determining that when there's an opportunity.
I agree.
And see you there in March 2023.
Well, we'd have to get authorization from the property owner to.
That's right.
Exactly.
That's right. I
so
think we
that's-
could do that. I think that's easily done, frankly. Yeah.
Correct. The only other additional business I've got is that, well, I've got two pieces that I just want to inform the commission. One is that we're still trying to move forward on the conservation restriction at 88 Milton Street. And I think we're making progress on that. The latest little hiccup that Steve and John Flynn worked on today, and I worked with John Flynn earlier today, was whether or not Balster Brook at that point is a perennial stream. And it appears to be because it's a blue line on the USGS map, and it's presumptively that. And I don't think they could disprove it now, given the drought that we're in. So I'm assuming it's going in with the plans. And I think the issue, Steve, was because you would put that into the baseline report that is
Yes.
required now by EOEEA.
That's correct.
Because they actually have final approval on all conservation restrictions. So you may recall, those that have been on the commission for a while, that back in 2014, when the house was sold at 88 Milton Street, that's when we got a $75,000 fine for a violation that occurred back in 1997, and another one in 1998. And we filed our enforcement orders and recorded them at the Registry of Deeds. So in order to clear the title, that fine had to be paid for the sale of the property. So in addition to the fine, we had an agreement with the new owners that they would do a conservation restriction on it's about an acre, Steve, a little bit over an acre?
A little bit smaller than an acre.
Small
yes.
acre, okay, all right. But I think it's all to the good.
Yes.
And then the last point that I wanted to bring up is that I had a conversation today with Scott McKay, formerly of the Park Department, and Kevin Chisholm, who is currently on the Park Department. And the purpose of it was to discuss that which was on our last agenda in July, and that was that whether or not somebody would support and pay for a playground on Peverly Park. Peverly Park is that open space that is between Summer Street and Pope's Pond. And we're all familiar with that. We've talked extensively about trying to put a second bridge in there and have a path that goes all the way around the pond for the public, similar to Turner's Pond. So the idea was, can we do a joint application to actually do that circumnavigation of the pond, which would include a bridge? That's a cost item now because Northeastern University ran out of money. And you may recall that they did the bridge at the north side of it, the Mattapan side of the pond. Yeah, but in order to get all the way around the pond, we need another bridge at the south side of the pond, nearer to Yulin Rink and Canton Avenue. And an issue came up, and Pete Jackson was there, and he was trying to facilitate this plan. And he did a study of the deed language to see whether or not there was any restriction. He also did a study, and we've referred everything to town council for an opinion as to whether or not we, as the deeded owners of that open space, can go from passive recreation to active recreation, or whether or not there's any kind of restriction. It was kind of a sensitive topic for us because Pete Jackson, has taken a position publicly at our meeting on the school building committee swap of land on Guile Road. So we were being very careful today and thought that we would be well served to go to town council for their expert opinions, plural. So that's what we're going to do, to see whether or not it's appropriate for the Conservation Commission to shift land from passive to active recreation, and whether or not it has any significance at all. So it's now in the hands of town council. Actually, not quite yet, because I called Kevin Freitag today, but I haven't had a chance to talk to him yet, but I expect to tomorrow. Arthur, do you have any interest in participating in that? Because this would be, as the applicant, or it was informational only, but in the July meeting, a young woman presented her case for a new playground, because that side of town really doesn't have too many playgrounds.
From the select board point of view, John, is that your input?
Yes.
Only if it is something that would ultimately come to the select board, and so far, it doesn't sound like it would. But I could contact Kevin and find out, and if he thinks so, then I'd be happy to chime in.
All right. Well, we were talking about different alternatives, and one of them that came up from Pete Jackson was, well, what about a land swap between the park department and the Conservation Commission? And that would involve the select board. I'm sorry, I didn't give you all the details of the meeting.
And that would ultimately go from the select board to town meeting.
Correct. Correct again.
So, yeah, I'd want to be kept in the loop, certainly. And if you want me to have a presence there, I'd be happy to.
That's fine. It just happened at 1:30 this afternoon.
Okay.
That we had the meeting, and it was up to
Kevin
me.
didn't mention anything. He and I were on the line today on other business, and that didn't come up.
Well, no, it wouldn't have, because when I called him, as soon as we finished the meeting at 1:45, I called Kevin, but I didn't hear back from him. So
okay.
he would not have known. It's not that he forgot.
That makes sense, right?
All right, but I'll pursue him and see if I can get a hold of him tomorrow.
Well, John, there are still quite a few outstanding property questions out there. Where where the property lies, where fences are, and I mean, if
you're talking about 589 Blue Hill Avenue, Blue Hill Parkway, that's the last house. It's right on the corner.
I guess that's.
Yeah, that came up today because we were talking about whether or not there was a way to provide access all the way to Canton Avenue. And you recall, I don't know, 5, 6, 7, 8 years ago, that house was under foreclosure and bank auction for years. And I made I approached the broker to see if we could buy a narrow strip of land, but that went nowhere. But I didn't get any response back from the broker for that idea. So it was sold, and now the new owner who's put some money into it has, I think, put up a sign or a fence or something.
Fencing, and I'm not certain it actually is consistent with their property boundary, but I mean, that's something that may need to be looked into, unfortunately.
No, and we actually had that discussion today, because my memory of our previous discussion on that very issue was that we didn't know if the town would actually do the survey. And Arthur, you may know this. Can the engineering department or Public Works, I mean, do they have the survey capability that would do that for us?
We could ask them if they can survey our property.
Yeah. Right.
They may not have the equipment. Just my guess. I don't believe they have the equipment.
Yeah. And then get an answer from them.
All right,
Sure.
Steve, will you ask? I'm not sure. Would that be Chase Berkeley, or would it be Miranda Fernandez? Or who would you ask?
I would start with Chase.
Chase, yes.
Chase? Okay.
But I'd probably give him a one-pager that describes the history of this and what it is being sought for, and it's to determine what the town's property is in that area of Pope's Pond.
Sure.
I
On a-
remember looking at it very closely with Joe Sloan. We had plans, we had a tape measure, and we concluded that all the way from Pope's Pond to Canton Ave, there was 20 feet on the east side of the brook that was town land. It varied very much in the width, but it never got narrower than 20 feet. So maybe that survey would bring that up.
Yeah, and we know that we've had from other property situations down there, adverse impact where people have literally moved their property lines along Blue Hill Parkway.
Yeah.
So
It's going to be a touchy subject.
no question about it. But it's something that we have to resolve. This has been going on for, what did you say, John, a decade?
Yes,
Yes.
that's correct.
On a related note, it looks like there's some construction fencing that has just gone up on the Ice House property. So,
It's underway.
yes, well, I don't know if it's underway, but they mowed it, fenced it off, so might be worth checking in. Looking
Thanks,
forward to
Tom.
see how that project progresses.
Yes.
Yeah, Steve, I can't remember. I thought we had a pre-construction meeting as part of our, one of our conditions.
Yes, we did have that on 101 Neponset Valley Parkway, and it never happened.
All right, well, you might want to check in with the Ice House folks. I think they'll be pretty cooperative.
Yeah, and
I will.
construction had, let me be clear, construction has not started. It's just
Sure.
fencing.
Fencing, sure.
So it might not be, so,
They don't have an order of conditions, do they?
yes, they do.
Yes, they do.
They do, huh?
They
Didn't
do.
know that.
All right, so Steve, you'll check on that one as well?
They'll do.
Perfect, all right. Arthur, any other new business or anybody else, actually?
I have a remark. A resident of Turner's Pond area contacted the Ponds River Watershed and said, look at this picture I took at night across Turner's Pond,
Oh,
facing the west side where the gravel turnaround is. And the picture showed a very, very bright light that kind of blinded the camera, even though it was across the pond. And it backlit the row of big white pines that are in the park area there. And the question from the resident was, is this harmful to the wildlife of the pond when you have a very powerful floodlight shining into the area? Now, it could be that the picture that was, which also blew up on Facebook and Milton Neighbors, it could be the picture was a little deceptive. But
No,
it did
no, it's
seem-
not. It's not.
Oh, you know about this then?
Oh,
Well, I
this is
wonder-
a controversy in the town for about a year now.
I didn't know
That's the
that.
big
Yeah.
spotlight.
Oh, there are 13 of them. Tom, we had a site visit there. We weren't there for that purpose, but we had a site walk and I think we counted 13 lights. It's like Logan
Huh.
Airport runway lights. It's huge.
Yeah, that is unbelievable at night. I've been by it.
Well, doesn't it seem that if our charge is to review proposals to dredge, alter, or fill, those lights alter. They alter a resource area. They're not pouring in chemicals, but they are pouring in light. So I would think that we might have some jurisdiction.
Tom, just for the better, and if anybody else doesn't know this, we've had a number of meetings involving the select board, the town council, the town planner, the engineering department,
Building department.
building department.
Ah.
There have been all kinds of things, and
I see.
we've got several options that are kind of still sitting on the table, and I'll fall on my sword here because I have not pursued one that I think is going to fall back on me. I thought town council was going to do it, but one of the options that we considered would be to have a town bylaw, a lighting bylaw. And Arthur has been, very aggressive in asking people to submit other proposed and actual town bylaws from other towns that restrict the lumens. I think there are two measures of light. One is the lumen, and I forget what the other one is.
Right.
But we actually, Tom, had a meeting last, I don't know, December, I want to say. where we invited two people from the Dark Sky, the International Dark Sky Association, to make a presentation. And, because we asked that same question, do we have jurisdiction over light pollution? And the answer is maybe. Because we
Right,
involve
right.
DEP, we got an opinion from DEP, and they say, well, you have jurisdiction over wildlife habitat, but you don't have jurisdiction over wildlife, which is interesting. So the question is, well, doesn't the light affect the circadian system, the life of the fish? I mean, are we impacting the lives of birds and rodents and whatnot? So that was an issue. So we asked for a collection of scientific data, and we had great assistance from, who was the professor? Ingrid.
From Smith College. Yeah, I don't remember his name.
Yeah, that's right.
So we started collecting data on this, and one was to do a sign bylaw. I'm sorry, a light pollution bylaw. Another one was, we talked about a public nuisance claim. We talked to town council directly about this. Is it a public nuisance? And he was going to explore that. And Arthur, I did get back to Kevin probably a couple of months ago and just kind of brought it up again and said, we've got to move forward on something. Because should we do an enforcement order? And just for your knowledge, Steve tried to contact the fellow, as did, was it Joe Prondak, Steve, that you went with?
Yeah.
And I think Chase knocked on the door and
None of us have had any success, but it's sort of ironic because I believe the gentleman who owns the residence and has the lights works for the National Park Service.
Yeah.
Doubt that.
Yeah.
Well, I found him on the internet. You looked him up, through the town, found the same exact name and middle name and last name. And he was very proud of his work with the National Park Service. So go figure, huh?
Well, there's a lot more on the internet if you dig a little deeper, Steve.
I'm sure there is.
We're at a public meeting, so I probably shouldn't bring it up, but you don't have to look too far.
Right.
So,
Well, thank you, John.
And Tom, for your benefit, I think both Ingrid and Wendy have received complaints from neighbors as well.
Yes.
So it's actually appropriate for us to do something, because everybody's complaining about it.
Yeah.
And I won't be shy about this. My wife is a great walker, and she walks around Turner's Pond a lot. And last winter she was out there, and it was after, I knew it was going to be after dark. And she was blinded and she couldn't see anything. And she tripped and fell and got bumped and bruised. So she will be a witness if she's not going to bring a lawsuit, but she'll be a witness that she was totally blinded by it. She couldn't see anything, and tripped over a root and down she went because she couldn't see anything. So it's a big issue. And we need somebody, and I confess that I have not followed through on working on this town bylaw against light pollution.
So Arthur, there's just doing a quick Google search. If you do a search for Massachusetts towns with outdoor lighting ordinances,
yep,
there's a compilation of all the towns that have existing ordinances.
Right. We've got it.
Okay.
We got it.
We just have to get the time to do it.
Yeah.
Wouldn't he be grandfathered?
No, not it would be. This came up with town council because we said, why don't we go after him for zoning violations? And can we change the zoning law? And he said, no, the problem with the zoning law is that he would be grandfathered in under the zoning, but he would not be grandfathered in if you passed a new light pollution bylaw. So that's the push where we need to go. I think we could do an enforcement order, but we'd have to have some kind of a scientist come in. And Tom, it goes directly to what you just asked. Does that light have an adverse impact upon the wildlife habitat?
Oh, and there's tons of publications on that subject, John.
I know.
One example is that damselflies and dragonflies lay their eggs on water bodies because they're attracted to the polarized light given off by the sheet of water. But if you put floodlights, then they lay the eggs in parking lots and windshields because they think they're water bodies. So that's an adverse impact to wildlife rather than a wildlife habitat. But you could say that the dark water of the pond at night is a habitat. And with these lights, it's not dark anymore. So I don't know. It seems to work common sense wise.
True, but I think if we were to issue or consider issuing an enforcement order, we would need to have, somebody, an expert, file an affidavit that it does have an impact upon something.
Yes. That might be quicker than getting a bylaw passed.
Should we consider consulting with an environmental attorney?
Sure, but you're gonna have to pay for it. That's
No-
why we went to town council, remember?
Right, but
We probably had to pay for that too.
there's some specific resources out there.
Yes, there are.
Does anyone remember, who was that, the scientist that came and spoke to us?
It was Carrie Snyder from NEPRA, wasn't it?
Oh, maybe
She
you're right.
started, but she's the one that brought the two professors to the
Yes.
meeting.
There were two professors. Do you recall where they were from?
One was from Smith College. And
Right,
the
I've
other,
got notes on
and
it.
his friend was from Chelmsford.
Yeah, and we've got like an email history going back and forth with them. I've got notes on it,
That's
on
right.
discussions. What it requires is somebody to actually, take the time and focus on it to get it done. Tom Palmer, you sound like a guy that would be very interested in this.
I do know Carrie, and I've actually corresponded a bit with her just today about it. So I will get back to her and see if she thinks this idea would go anywhere. She's an attorney. And I think she feels that they should respond to the woman who complained to them. So it may be the parts are starting to come together. Not that I'm saying I will fix it myself.
No, but I think all we need would be an affidavit from an expert to say that it does have an impact. Because our first stop was with DEP, and that's where I got the advice that it's the jurisdiction is over the wildlife habitat as opposed to the wildlife.
Yeah, that's a tricky thing, as you mentioned. You have to show that the adverse impact is to the habitat, not the wildlife, to the habitat. The
But
habitat interest.
John, if DEP is saying that, how are you gonna defend it by someone else's, saying it is when the state is saying we don't have jurisdiction?
No,
Well,
they're
that's
saying
not what they're
we
saying.
do have jurisdiction over wildlife habitat. What we
Correct.
need is a scientist to come in and say the light pollution does affect the habitat. DEP's not taking a stand on whether the light affects it or not. They're just saying distinguish between wildlife and wildlife habitat.
Well,
But
John,
John, has there been any case law in Mass that anybody's won it?
that's
I'm
why
not, I'm not aware of any.
that's why I was talking about environmental law.
Yeah, because I mean,
Someone with a specialty and research that. But
if
if we had a bylaw, then we would have to, once the bylaw is in place, then we could, case by case, ascertain whether or not the area impacted was a habitat. And if it was, then the bylaw kicks in.
The
Yeah,
bylaw.
No, that's different, Arthur. I think the light pollution bylaw will stand on its own. It doesn't, that would not be limited to whether or not it was wildlife or wildlife habitat.
Yeah, I
That
think
would
that's
be based
right.
upon whether or
Yeah.
not you exceed, 50 lumens
Right.
at 10 feet or however they measure.
Just a
There is a
nuisance.
measure.
Yeah, it could be a nuisance that doesn't have any effect on wildlife. That
Correct.
would be covered by the ordinance.
There's a public nuisance.
Yeah, all I'm saying, John, is before we go jump, it'd be better to have a bylaw or some attorney that's dealt with it to say, yes, this case law on such and such, because it might backfire on us.
Yeah. I'm with Todd.
Well, I'm not sure what you mean by backfire on it. If we had you know, and I'm not talking about some, you know, rent a
Yeah,
professor. I'm talking about a legitimate, recognized environmental scientist, and not a lawyer, but a scientist, to say that light pollution does affect the habitat.
what,
Then DEP would support us.
again, who's to say DEP is gonna support just because some professor says that?
Well, that's I don't know. That's the business I'm in. I mean, that's we do it
I
all the
know.
time. You get an expert to testify, and if you know, if it's credible, if it passes, you know, the litmus test of legitimacy, then you can proceed on that basis. This is
Yeah,
not
I just thought
frivolous.
My,
Be easy.
my,
It's a frivolous issue.
my suggestion would be to, for the first step would be to do some sort of avian study to look at what sort of birds are actually present, you know, that use the pond. And then you'll have an idea of what sort of habitat needs those species would have. And then you can make a determination whether or not they're being impacted by the presence of the light
Yeah.
impact.
That's a great, Hans, that's a great idea, because we have a baseline study. We just had a bird study there at Turner's Pond. We spent $3,500 for it. What, 4 years ago? We had one at Pope's Pond and one at Turner's Pond. So we've got our baseline right there. And maybe we could have it, you know, done again and have a study to see exactly what you just said. I think it's a great idea.
One problem with an enforcement order is that it would be ignored.
Why do you say
Sort of
that?
can't.
Yeah, what do you do if they ignore the enforcement order?
There's a fine per day
Yeah.
that applies to the enforcement order. And in addition to that, and the order is attached to the deed of the property. So I mean, the issuance of an enforcement order isn't a small thing. It's not something that should be taken lightly, but you know, if it's determined to be appropriate, then yeah, that's not something that should generally be ignored, because that can get expensive.
I got a feeling we're gonna end up in a lawsuit over this one.
Sure. There's a risk for that.
Hey,
I don't disagree with you.
that's like throwing Brer Rabbit into the briar patch.
Yeah, because,
Bring it on.
well,
Okay.
But that's all conjecture unless we're able to you know, take the step forward and have someone make a determination on whether or not there is an impact to the wildlife habitat or not.
Correct. So just as a takeaway, so we know what's going to happen next, Tom, will you talk to Carrie Snyder and
Yeah,
see
I
if
will.
she can come up with a person that's, you know, legitimately say that
Right.
that affects the wildlife habitat?
I think it's come to that because she said, well, wouldn't it make sense to talk to the property owner and find out what he wants and see if we can accommodate it, like having sensors and so forth. But apparently that's not really an option.
Well, that was the first thing. I mean, this goes back more than a year ago.
Yes.
And that was my first statement. Just go talk to the guy.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Chase Berkeley tried it. Joe Prondak tried it. Steve Ivas tried it.
It did.
It didn't work.
well, maybe send him a letter and see if that does anything.
I think Chase did.
Oh, he did?
I'll try to confirm that with Chase Berkeley, but I believe he did. Right. And I think when that happened, it went from 9 lights to 13 lights. I think when we were there, we counted 13 lights. And they are really, really bright.
And so to clarify, some of those lights are actually,
You're not even bringing up with our topic. I'm just waiting
What
and
are you watching for?
some of those lights are actually not
I
even
did, and I
on
don't
the
know.
interior of the property. They are,
Yes, I am, but you should listen to the shit that they talk.
have to sign that?
Mr. Schaefer, is there something you'd like to speak to us about?
No, it's just interesting listening.
All right, democracy in action. All right. All right, so Tom, can you report back to us, see anything you can
Yes.
get by way of an expert?
Yes.
All right, that's great. And I'll follow up with Kevin Freitag on a couple of different things, and this can be one of them, certainly. All right.
John, there's one other item that I'd like to at least let people know about. I did have an inquiry from a member of the public, again, for the Gun Hill Milton site yard question about how the shrubs and trees are doing on the slope.
Yes.
And I went there recently and I could not find a shrub or a tree growing on that slope. So I've been in touch with the consultant and one of the staff members over at Milton Academy. And we're going to have a confab, and hopefully they'll plant again in the fall, just to let you know. But none of the plantings were successful on the slope.
Yeah. But
That's
they did plant and they were unsuccessful, right?
Yes.
Yeah, if they don't have water out there, I don't think anything's going to be successful this year.
Agreed.
Go by the Blue Hills.
Bad year.
Yes, a very bad year for planting. Just to let you
Especially
know.
on a slope.
Right. And two of the trees that deciduous trees that they put in the berm at the top of the slope also died. They were good sized trees as well, just to let you know. So I'm working on it with them.
Okay. Any other items of additional business? Anything, Wendy?
No, sir. Thank you.
Okay. Anyone else? Arthur, anything?
Steve,
Thank you.
did you ever get a chance to look at the restoration work that was at the path near my house?
Yes, I sure did. Yeah, well, they put too much loom in there. They threw some seed on the top and walked away. And guess what? There's been no water in the last 2.5 weeks since I saw it.
Yeah.
So therein lies the problem. Yeah, Hans, just to let you know. You know,
Yeah.
you've seen it, right?
Yeah, it's pretty humorous what they did.
Yeah. Yeah, it's sort of sad, actually.
Yeah, I almost question whether or not it's worthwhile for the town to expend additional resources to repair it, but yeah, we'll see what happens when we get some substantive rain and whether or not
Exactly. Yep, you're right on. We can all pray for rain. Maybe Saturday we can do a rain dance.
All right.
Sorry, had to say.
Any other items of additional business from any commissioners? All right, then I think we're ready to adjourn. Is there a motion to adjourn?
So
Do
moved.
you have to ask members of the public? Or do you?
On additional business? Yeah, I guess you're right. Are there any members of the public that would like to ask about or make a comment on additional business? Hearing none. Now, do we have a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second.
Thanks. Arthur, Ingrid, Tom, all in favor, say aye.
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 Hi.
Unanimous. Thank you all very much. And good luck on Saturday morning at
8:30.
8:30. Okay. I wasn't going to say it. All right. Thanks. Good night, guys.
Good night.
Good night.
I'd all see you Saturday.
Everybody.